All right. Like I said, welcome. My name is Jessica Johnston. I have the pleasure of being the Director of Military Student Support here at CSS. I have been here in a similar role since 2011 and have seen a lot of changes in our veteran population here at St. Scholastica, and excited to take some time today to highlight the experiences of our increasingly large population of National Guard members who are balancing serving the country, the state, and doing school and all of their personal demands as well. So I'm going to start out. We're going to do some intros. Jack Lee, do you want to start out here and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jack Lee. I work with Jessica, helping the veterans on campus here. And then I also teach in the social work department as an adjunct professor. So yeah, thanks for coming today. And I really look forward to this myself, just learning more about the Guard. I don't know why, I guess I don't know why I haven't looked into it more. So yeah.
And then we've got 3 students with us. Riggs, you want to start off saying your name, your job in the military, and what you're studying here at St. Scholastica.
Yeah, so I'm Riggs Olson. I am a member of the Air National Guard at the 148th Fighter Wing in Duluth, Minnesota. My duty is as administration. Primarily titled as Commander Support Staff for the Operations Group and the 179th Fighter Squadron. On campus, I am a senior biochemistry major, so I'll be graduating here in a few weeks.
So excited, so exciting. Jacob.
Yeah, I'm Jacob Dahlberg. I graduated from Scholastica undergrad in 2018, and now I'm in the PA program. First year. I'm been in the Army National Guard for 12 years as a medic, and continue to go to drill and try and do all the things while in PA school, which is fun.
Yeah, that's a lot. Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm a sophomore here at CSS, and I'm a biology major. I'm also at the 148th Fighter Wing. There, I'm a bioenvironmental engineering technician. So I kind of just work in industrial health and safety. And yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Erin. Greg.
Hi, I'm Greg White. I am a newly promoted associate professor now at the School of Nursing. I have worked here for the last 6 years. I got hired initially under a veteran to BS in nursing grant, and I have stayed on the college after the grant expired, and we've continued the program. I am in the Air National Guard. I have been for 15 years. I was enlisted for the first 9 years. I was a flight medic and an operational medic after that. And I switched commissioned as a critical care nurse. Now I'm a nurse practitioner. So I've used all my benefit, and I can talk all about that if you'd like.
Can you say a little bit about what it means to be commissioned versus enlisted?
Yeah, so enlisted is the backbone of the military. And so when you think about in the Army, we think about privates and sergeants. In the Air Force, it's airmen and sergeants. Sergeants is kind of the non-commissioned officer group. Petty officers in the Navy. It's the group of folks that do most of the work and are in charge of really making the military run. An officer, I have a little bit of a skewed perspective because I'm a medical officer. And so we still are very hands-on and we still do a lot of work. But traditionally, officer group is the decision makers, the leaders working with the non-commissioned officers to lead groups of soldiers, airmen, Navy, or Marines, and seamen.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. And Dr. Nutgrass, if you wouldn't mind.
Hi, I'm Clayton Nutgrass. I'm the director here at the Duluth Vet Center in Duluth, Minnesota. We're actually right up the road from St. Scholastica, not too far. I've been here in Duluth for 5 years. I just celebrated my 5-year anniversary a couple of weeks ago. Prior to that, I was in the St. Louis VA Medical Center in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist as well as a licensed professional counselor. And I've been in practice since 2001. I've been licensed since 2004. Have some background in community mental health, and then also obviously working with veterans for roughly the past 10 years. I am a civilian, which puts me at a little bit of a disadvantage, but pretty grounded in military culture. I think that's one of the important things about working with veterans, is at least being open to learning about military culture and what it means to be a veteran, and how the military service impacts different aspects of their life. So with that in mind, is how I'm able to operate as a civilian, is just by being open to different folks and their experiences.
Yeah. I'm also a civilian, so I can appreciate, the inquisitiveness that sometimes comes from that civilian lens. So for everyone, for those who just joined us, if you have any questions, feel free to just put them in the chat. We'll be answering questions as we go through. The purpose of today is to give you a little bit of a glimpse into what it means to serve in the National Guard, what National Guard members provide to our society, what we can do as a campus to better support them, some best practices there. And to give a voice to the nearly 50 students we have who are serving in the National Guard while doing school. And that number has gone up in the last 10 years. We spent a lot of money working on veterans who came back from operations in Afghanistan and Iraq early in the 2000s, and the future really is National Guard. And we're seeing a lot of students join to pay for school, join to be a part of a bigger mission. And in the last 10 years, it went from 30-ish students in the National Guard to now around 50, and also being really, really heavily involved in current events. So in the last year, we've had folks defending at the Capitol. We've had folks protest in George Floyd's murder. Like, our students are involved in these major moments in history, and we wanted to have an opportunity to hear their stories a little bit more and what we can do to support them. So we're so glad you're here. I'm going to start with Jack kind of setting the stage on some terminology so that what's the National Guard versus active duty, and what are some of those terms that we should know before we get started here?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. So yeah, I wanted to highlight too, although there is a lot going on today, this is a recording. And the other thing that we're really trying to do, I feel, is we're trying to establish a relationship with veteran services outside of our campus too. So for example, having Dr. Knotgrass here to kind of see what our school's struggling with, maybe what he's seeing, and using that as kind of a guide or a pendulum to kind of always be going in the right direction, and having some backup services for our veterans if we fall short. So again, thanks for being here, Dr. Knotgrass. I appreciate that. So just like I'm just going over like active duty, reserves, and National Guard, and kind of the differences in them before we open up with some questions to the students. So active duty, really, I looked this up on the va.gov. Really just a simple thing is they work full-time for the military, and they fall under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. You can't quite quit, you can't take a day off if they don't let you, that kind of stuff. And then really the Uniform Code of Military Justice is really a lot different than having your rights come from the US Constitution. So although that's really positive for the military, it can be frustrating for veterans. So then reserves, their primary job is just to fill in the gaps in stateside service. And then also if there's federal emergencies, they kind of fill the role of veterans that are leaving here. I know that's not always the case, but a lot of reservists fill that role at home here. while the active duty members go out into the field. And they have to do the 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks per year, which is similar to the Guard. So that would be one similarity with the Guard. I'm thinking that's right. If I'm wrong in any of this, let me know, Riggs or Greg, Aaron. National Guard consists of Air and Army. It's federally funded, but is run by the state. So Governor Walz is the chief commander, I believe. And in times of conflict, the Guard can be federalized and deployed. So that brings up some interesting conversations here moving forward that I never really thought about, is students here on campus that don't know when they're going to be deployed versus being active duty and being out of the military and not having that on your mind. So I'm really interested to hear what you all have to say about that. And then if I believe if a National Guard member serves in a combat situation for over 30 days, then they're considered a U.S. or a veteran. I'm not really sure how that works. And then they only fall under the USMJ, or the Uniform Code of Military Justice, when they're federalized and out of state. When they're in state doing work, whatever it is, they don't fall under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So I think those are important.
Greg, I think, sorry, Greg's unclicking and clicking himself here.
Oh,
I can speak to a little of that. I think the big misnomer is that the active duty, Guard, and Reserve are actually really similar as far as if you are a medic in the Guard, it is the same training and expectations and training requirements as a medic in the Reserve, as a medic in the active duty. Same for Riggs, and Jacob. Jake's a medic, so that's actually a bad example, but because I just said it. But the training expectation is the same. Active duty, it's their job full time. And so their vulnerability to deployment is full time, but they're able to do their job and train for their job full time. The Reserve is strictly federal. It belongs to that branch of the military and the federal government. And they do backfill, but they can deploy as well. The Guard is kind of a hot mess in comparison. And so the Guard is notionally run by the active duty component. So the Air National Guard falls under the Air Force. The Army National Guard falls under the Army. There is no Joint Chief of Staff representing the Guard. But the command falls under the governor as well. So it's a shared service, shared resources. So that leads to a few really interesting things. Not only is it 30 days of federal service, which only happens for deployment. Reservists, when they're training, when they do anything, it's considered federal service because they're a branch of the federal military. National Guard, all of it is considered a different type of service. So a National Guard person, for example, my training pathway was about 6.5, 7 months. None of that counted towards benefits. And I'm sure all of us have that experience. It wasn't until I deployed twice that I was eligible for benefits. And so it takes 90 days of continuous service in order to be eligible for any sort of veterans benefits, any sort of tuition benefits outside of what the state offers. Or then the very small GI Bill that can be offered as well, which is a stipend only. An interesting thing about the Guard as well, because it does belong to the governor, it's the only branch of the military, and this is where this has been really unique in the last few years, that can be used for as a police force. So federal service troops, active duty and reservists can't be used as a police force. There's actually a constitutional amendment against that. National Guard, if they're not federalized, if they're activated under the state, can. And we saw that in the 60s with the civil rights protests, and we saw that again recently with some of the riots where the National Guard was the sole group of people that were even able to respond. Federal service troops, reservists, and active duty were not eligible to do that. That was Guard only. So that's why Guard has been used so heavily in these, is because nobody else is allowed to under the law. The biggest difference between those three is that nature of the service, the federal versus the state. And how that affects benefits for students, how that affects vulnerabilities for students, and how it can be a drastic, upsetting factor in day-to-day life. The other thing that's important, and this is for both Guard and Reservists, is for those of you who are in the Guard right now, so Aaron, Riggs, and Jake, when's the last time you've done just 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year? Have you ever done that little training?
Probably 8 years ago.
Yeah, I've been in for 15 and I've never done that. On average, it's about a month of training plus drill weekends. And that can be fitting in wherever. And sometimes you have years that are worse than that. So that 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, I've actually had some hard talks with recruiters every now and then, because it's not true. It's not the reality of trying to train to that active duty standard, plus do your job, plus train for whatever mission your unit or your specific job code may be a part of.
Wondering if any of the students could speak to why you maybe chose to go this route for your service, and anything of what Greg said that you felt like really kind of hit home with your experience so far.
I can touch a little bit on that. For me, going into college, I knew that I was my sole provider for paying for college. So that was one big aspect of what led me towards serving. Also, my father was really big into joining. He had a lot of regrets when he was younger not joining. So he would always say like, oh, this is sweet, you should do this, you'll get a pension, like it'll be awesome. But looking more into it, I knew that for my personal circumstances, I didn't want to serve full time because of just personal obligations. So the Guard was very fitting, where I could still serve, but also get the benefits that I wished and needed for school and such like that. One thing that Greg did touch on is that it is not just 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. Right now, I've been on active orders for about 9 months, which does impact school a little bit. But it's all because of other people in the Guards that have been deployed or forward deployed or retired, and we still need to function as a base and still need people home doing the job. So sometimes, us younger enlisted are get tasked with those kind of things. So.
And when you say you're on active orders, means you are reporting there at the base in a full-time capacity.
Right. So there's the traditional status of a Guardsman that just does their weekend days or their drills. But there's also the AGR status, which is Active Guard Reserve. Right now, I'm just a temporary AGR, which is pretty much the same status as a full-time Air Force member, just in the Guard and Reserves.
Yeah. Which certainly makes balancing things challenging. So, for sure. Thank you. Aaron.
So I joined the Air National Guard just to help pay for schooling, and it was like another source of a stable income. And then I did a part-time thing just because the military wasn't like my main goal in life. I wanna go into veterinary school. I want to be that. Maybe it will be a full-time thing down the road if my plans don't go the way I want them to. But yeah, it was just kind of also doing school during COVID was kind of not super fun. So I also went the military route during those times because online learning isn't the most fun thing to do. So it was kind of just a perfect little break to go in and then come back. And now we're all back in class. So that's super nice. But yeah, it's not just the 1 week in a month. And the 1 week thing, I mean, I'm not an AGR, but there's definitely positions open. And then right when I got back from tech school, there's a lot of people there. Our chief, I'm in the med group. He was asking us like who would be available to go on deployments. So, I mean, unfortunately, I was not available just because I had to go through the rest of my training. But yeah, so you can always, it's always like, it's always up there in the air that there's always deployments going on and just seeing who's available to go. And speaking of like deployments and stuff like that, it's kind of like based on, so you take volunteers first, and then it's also based on like your life situation. So a lot of students, just because they're in school, they try not to like take students out of school. But say if I wasn't in school, it's just the summertime, I don't have a family that I have to take care of, so they'd probably, hey, if you're ready to go, you can leave. So I mean, there is always that option that I'm gonna be just plucked out of my home, but that's okay. That's what we signed up for. So it's just an exciting experience.
Thank
So
you.
Aaron, could I ask you a follow-up question as far as what has the Guard like given you in regards to being a better student, or like do you feel like you have more leadership roles in the classroom, or?
Definitely I'm a more like confident person. So I'm able to like speak up a lot more in class. And then a little more social as well. So I mean, I was kind of already a nerd before I went to basic training and tech school. So it just even like I feel like I was driven throughout basic training and tech school. So it helped coming back because so I took a year off of school. So just going through basic training and then tech school and then coming back into school, it was really helpful because I didn't really have that like break as well. I just went right back into schooling. So that's kind of nice. And yeah, you also like learn a lot. And I feel like I could definitely accomplish a lot more. Like, because hey, I went through all of this, I went through these hard times, I went through intense like schooling, and now I'm back in like a regular education, like civilian education, like, and it definitely helps. Like, hey, I've already been through this, I know I can get through this. Like, just keep pushing yourself. Like, whatever you put in, you're gonna get out. Same for like military. Like, hey, I put in my work, put in my time, and I'm receiving those benefits. So definitely, it just helps like to show that, hey, when you put the work in, stuff comes back. So
Thank you. Jacob, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience? And then you've been at CSS a while, and sort of like maybe what are some things that faculty or staff have done that you appreciated as a Guard person, balancing everything? Anything comes to mind?
Yeah. So I have a bit of a unique story for joining the Guard. I actually joined the Guard for a sports program that the Guard has, did that for about 6 years, and then decided to stay in the Guard for the education benefits. And then did 2.5 years at Scholastica for undergrad. At the time, I was in the portion of the Army National Guard that was doing a ton of training. I think the year before I started at Scholastica, we did, I think, 120 days of training in that year. Not necessarily everybody, but all of us. Some people ended up doing 120 days. I did most of that, so it was quite a lot. And then at the time, I had professors that were open to helping me, and I have a hard time saying, hey, I know that I have this extra commitment, but I don't want you to give me extra time or help. sometimes I will ask for that, but I have a hard time myself asking for that. And I think, there's probably other people that have a hard time with that. A few times this year in particular with PA school, I've had times I've had to be gone or, drill before 3 exams, and they're willing to move things around and adjust things for me a little bit, which is very helpful, knowing that I have responsibilities at drill. And it's harder now, like for me as a staff sergeant, having a bit more responsibility at drill and a bit going on, rather than back when I was an E4 or even just a regular sergeant with a few more responsibilities. So, but yeah, the little bit of adjusting here and there has been really helpful.
Can I add something here?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of us joined, and I certainly joined as for tuition. And we had a desire to do something more, but tuition was a big factor here. Minnesota has one of the highest rates because the Guard, your tuition assistance comes from the state. Minnesota has one of the highest tuition reimbursements in the country. And so it's important to differentiate between Minnesota National Guard versus Wisconsin National Guard because they're night and day. But again, the tuition benefits here are great, and it's enough that I could afford to go to school. Talking about when Erin was talking about how she feels like she can do a lot more with the training, that was evident for me as well. I dropped out of college. If I had stayed, I would have failed. Not a good reason to stay in college is a psych major and playing rugby and having a great time, but not a good reason to stay. But after I joined the military and figured out if I apply myself and if I work hard, I think all of us had that same experience as I learned how to follow through. And I learned how to take on more than I thought I could, and do well, and you can get the benefit from that. So I think that's a pretty common experience a lot of military people have, and National Guard especially, because how many of you came home and were active duty right away? You had to get back to it and get back to life and then continue to try to work in the military. And so multitasking comes with the game. So how do you do well at both? Because you can't be just good in the military and not good in the civilian world if you're going to get ahead, because the military only gets you so far. It's almost like a separate life.
A separate life that you're bouncing around from place to place. And then, what impact does that have? How do you manage that? And, I don't know if Dr. Knockrass, if you've seen, folks kind of balance coming off of their military career and, transitioning out of that bouncing around has got to be challenging too. Because this is a whole lifestyle of doing a lot of responsibilities for a lot of different people and not asking for help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of our challenges is where do we fit in? So I think sometimes when folks do need some help, where am I going to fit that help into work, school, family, all the things that I'm trying to do? And now somebody's telling me, or now I realize that, yeah, I'm struggling with some things. And how do I fit that into my already busy schedule is actually something that's challenging. On top of the fact, sort of related to that is a potential stigma. I'm going to go do this thing that theoretically might impact my military career. We're separate from the DoD, and we keep all of our records separate from the DoD, but there's still the concern that this might impact my military career in adverse ways. And so how do I go do this thing that's hard to fit into my schedule that also I'm afraid might impact my career?
Speaking about getting help for mental health, getting help for physical health, all those kinds of things. I don't know if, it's a lot, and then yourself isn't important. Yeah.
I can definitely attest to when we were talking about trying to separate your military and your civilian life. I remember, I don't know if you remember, Jessica, but when I first came back, I was in your office bawling my eyes out because I was having such a hard time adjusting to civilian life again when I got back. Just because it's such a different environment. when you're in the military, you have a schedule. You have a set schedule every single day of the week. And then you're also with all these people that have gone through the same experiences as you. Like they're your new family now. Like I didn't see my family for 6 months. So these people that I went through everything with, they were my new family. They were my rock, my everything. So coming back from like that experience was super hard. And then also like the social aspect of it, like when you're thrown in. So I was obviously in BMT in a flight of 50 girls, and we we're all going through the same experiences. So it was really easy to make connections and like bond with people. And then coming back, it was really hard to make friends because in that military aspect, you had to make friends with people because you had to work with them. You had to like be a team with them. And then now coming back, you don't have to be friend. Like everyone's just here to do school, and so it was really hard to like come back and adjust and like make friends and have a social life. Just because when you're in that military position, like you're kind of forced to make friends. You're forced with these people. So it was really hard coming back and readjusting to the civilian life.
And one of the unique things I think is that you can be making that transition all the time. If you are, deployed for a few months, then you come back, you have this long drill and then you come back, and like, that takes a toll. And I think, us at Scholastica, we need to do a better job of recognizing that. Yes, flexibility around your due dates, that's one thing, but like being able to be a safe space for students to talk about these other experiences they have in their life. And that we see, at least in my work, like I'll see Guard and veterans like come hang out in my office versus hanging out in the student union, because it's like I can't relate to those people, more or less. Jack, were you going to say something?
Oh, I remember that same feeling that Aaron had of not quite being home, kind of still being somewhere else, but you're really somewhere else. And yeah, it can be frustrating.
Maybe Clayton can elaborate on this a little bit, but I think that the challenges with Guard and Reserve, particularly after deployments, in active duty, if you deploy and you come home with your group. And if you deployed with a group, you tend to go back to base with that group, and you can kind of reacclimate and reintegrate with that group together. One unique thing about the National Guard, and this is true for the reservists as well, is when you come home, you go home. And that connection, that group, that family is gone. And you may see them again, you have some downtime, you may see them again in a few months, or you may not even, there's a few times I deployed with people I didn't even know. Not from my unit, not from my state, not from my, I've never seen them again. So you have to actually acclimate, not just, with a group of people, you're acclimating as an island. And Clayton, have you had experience with Guard and Reserve coming back where that's been a challenge?
Yeah. So we see that quite a bit. And one of the things that we're known as the Vet Center, but we're also known as Readjustment Counseling Services. And the reason why is this is part of our establishment as an organization underneath the VA was specific to readjustment, folks returning from service or deployment or whatever the case. And so I think we see this quite a bit. Obviously, we have a lot of veterans who fit the traditional veteran and full-time military service kind of category, but we also see a lot of National Guard, either current folks or people who are veterans from the National Guard. And as a couples counselor, that's one of the things that I talk about all the time is these folks who sort of, see my hands, who sort of live these parallel lives where I'm home, I'm married, I'm the parent, I'm the co-parent, and then I leave. And now the person at home is the person who's managing the household, managing the bills, managing whatever. And the person who's deployed is now managing their totally separate life. And then they come back and now they're trying to reintegrate into, now we're a couple, now we're a united team again, now we're co-parenting again, but yet I've been gone for X amount of time. And so my kids are in this weird space. And so there's all that sort of stuff too, that's connected to the family, connected to, as other folks are talking about, friends or social environment or work, their full-time job outside of guard duty, that sort of stuff. What's happened since I've been gone? And as other folks have talked about, these aren't, one weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. These can sometimes be extended deployments or extended times away, where the world changes while folks are gone. Sometimes better, but sometimes, in stressful ways as well. So trying to manage those changes and those shifts, and people are really good at it. And also it's people can be really good in terms of being flexible and being in terms of adjustment. And sometimes it's challenging too, because circumstances change or a phase of life happens while somebody's gone. A kid turns into a teenager, and now what? Because the phase of life has changed, and one person was there for it and the other person wasn't. So all sorts of dynamics that occur both socially and in the family realm and work and all that sort of stuff, that just make it a little bit challenging for the reintegration and adjustment phase.
And what recommendations would you have for, and this can go to you or to anyone, for a college trying to support the students who are coming back from a deployment for a semester and starting again? For us to help recognize that challenge, but also recognize there's lots of moving parts. Do you have any recommendations? And this goes to anyone, for like ways that we can recognize that and to support that transition, because it happens a lot. Is there anything? Yeah.
Well, again, this goes back to kind of me as a civilian. I mean, I can walk into a therapy session with all kinds of assumptions about what the person's going to be like, what the person has experienced, what the person is going through, and I think that would be part of a mistake. So I wouldn't make broad suggestions. What I would say is, as faculty and staff and administrators and fellow students, be open to listening to a person's experience if they're willing to share. Be open to, this person in front of me is different from that person who also, is in the military or in the Guard. And I think there is some overlap. I think, as Aaron was talking about, flights go through the same thing and there's this stuff, but each person is also different. It's not a cookie cutter version, and every Guard member, every veteran is going to be exactly the same. So I think as part of it is just working with whoever is in front of you to find out what their needs are, how you might be able to support them as a person versus just thinking about them as veteran, who that comes along with all these assumptions about what that means.
Yeah. Any students have any thoughts on that? And there obviously are a lot of assumptions, and as you all are speaking to your different jobs on your bases and the different work that you do, like it's quite intriguing, from an, outside perspective of like, you did what over the weekend? And I was, watched Netflix and ate jelly beans, or whatever. And lots of overlap, but also lots of unique experiences, and different jobs, different branches are having different experiences, yeah.
I think the only thing that comes to mind is just, especially on like a deployment or an extended period away, the transition back to school can just the academic part can be challenging to get back into, and just, I guess, some understanding when things are a little bumpy at the start and on the re-entry.
The following, just like, okay, how's it going? If you submit one thing late or you're not totally, following up for sure.
We did have a question on chat. How does one end their career in the National Guard?
I can take that one if nobody else is hungry for it.
I feel like it's yours, Greg.
Yeah, so a typical first term enlistment is 4 or 6 years. 6 years is more common. an enlistment is a contract. So at the end of the contract, you can choose to continue or you can choose to get out. And again, if you don't complete that 6 years, there can be several reasons, medical reasons. But more often, you're required to complete that 6 years unless there's kind of a disciplinary issue. After that, you can enlist for 1 year, 2 year, 4 year terms. Some people will keep on going in 6 if they intend to retire. But again, that's kind of a continued contract and you're expected to complete that obligation. As an officer, it's a little bit different. So I don't have an active bonus right now. That's the only thing they can do to really keep officers in. But if I wanted to resign my commission, I could resign my commission. My commission is open-ended. There's no contract. And the thought is they want officers who want to be there. No, my realistic goal is in about 5 years, I plan to retire and turn into mist and start hanging out with my kids on weekends again. But after 20 years, you're eligible. You get a letter saying you have 20 years and you can start your retirement process. Typically, people are closer to 21 by the time they get out.
Okay. Do you see a lot of folks doing the 20 years? Do you all?
Yes.
Okay.
So hold on. Jake probably sees less, but the Air National Guard tends to keep their folks. There's always a joke that you can promote when somebody dies or retires, one of the two, because there's not room. Army has a little bit more turnover in the lower enlisted, so those first 6 years. Air Force has a higher recruitment there, but usually when people choose to stay in past 6 years, most of the time it's committing to 20, or in there at least as their plan.
Yeah, I would say so. And then I think Army side, if you get through 12 years and you're on your third contract, whatever length you choose to do, at that point, people tend to stay for 20. You're
Okay.
over halfway. And
Just keep signing and doing the thing.
There's no pension unless you get to 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can get out at 18 and have something. It's all or nothing, 20 or nothing. So 12 years is kind of that cutoff where you see people have a real deep come to Jesus talk with themselves about, if I get out now, I can do it and not feel too bad. But at 15, I'm going to feel real bad if I get out now.
Yeah.
yeah, and I don't know how you use your benefits, Greg, but for me, the way I'm using my school benefits, even though I'll become an officer once I finish PA school, I'll owe them 4 years. Like I can't resign my commission or I'll have to pay back what they've paid me for school.
And I used the tuition, the state's tuition. So I didn't have the medical contract. So I used every red penny and don't owe them a dime, which is nice.
And quite I feel like you should get a medal for that. There's a lot of paperwork. National Guard folks have a lot of paperwork for education benefits. There's a lot of hoops I feel like they put y'all through, especially being, you don't qualify for veteran services until you've served for, how long did you say? What is it, 90 days, Greg?
90 days. You do get a 1606 GI Bill, which is a stipend. Is it at $350 a month or $375? That is eligible when you enlist or just for anybody who's in the military. But unless you deploy, you aren't eligible for anything else from the Guard. You have to have federal service.
And audience members, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in. We have a few other questions we had listed but happy to change topics if there are interest areas that you have. I'm curious, what are some proud moments in your career that you've achieved as a National Guard member in your military service?
I feel like I haven't really achieved a lot in my in the service, but I mean, it's social, just being in the military has brought me a lot of joy, like just in my life in general. So even though I haven't like really, like, hey, I made it through BMT and tech school, so I'm proud of that at least. And I haven't been in long enough to like, do like be like have there's like Airman of the Month and year and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get promoted in a couple weeks, so that's exciting. But just in general, it just adds so much to your life. I know we were kind of talking about, yeah, it is a commitment, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it. There's so many. I mainly joined just because of the benefits, just with school, but now it's become so much more than that. I don't know if any of the
Yeah.
other students can agree with me, but being in the military, you just like it's like a family. It really is. It was so weird. Like before I went to BMT and everything, they're like, yeah, like all these people are gonna be your family. You're gonna feel so different. And I never really understood like what that feeling was, but like it's definitely so different once you go through everything. I think you're just a lot more appreciative of everything, of your family, of everything you have, of your schooling, all the people around you. So it's definitely a life-changing experience. And I feel like if anyone is even like debating like doing the Air National Guard, I'd be like, just do it. Don't even think about it, just do it. I mean, everyone's experience is different, but I had a really positive one.
Jake, you've been in at least 8 years, you said,
I'm over 12.
over 12. So you want to offer the saltier side of that perspective?
Yeah, I mean I really enjoyed the Guard. The first couple of years I really got to do a lot hands-on, and I still enjoy it. A lot of it now is you're staying for certain benefits and health insurance and stuff like that. But I think some of that change is the demands of the Guard that over the years and the time away. And like I said, I still enjoy it. I still like going to drill. I still like putting the uniform on and going and doing it. But it gets a little harder to miss more and more things and sacrifice more. But again, I'm at that point now where it's worth staying and finishing up the 20 years.
It can be both things,
Mhm.
and it seems like it is both things for a lot of the experience.
Yep. And it shifts. Like I said,
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. And I really, on the Army side, being in
Yeah.
a combat arms unit, I love being out doing Army stuff. Like I did that for 6 years, like a lot. And then it was like, okay, now I still like it, but I want to take a little step back.
Yeah.
So it looks like we had a question from John Bauman. John had a scenario he wants to ask about. So John, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and ask that question.
Thanks. So I've had a couple of students who announced either winter or early spring semester in the last few years that they wouldn't be back until maybe the third week of fall semester. And they asked, what should they do? And after having listened today and just thinking, tell me if I'm on the mark. First, email their instructors that they're going to have in the fall to inform them they'll be late in entering school. Second, take care of themselves. Third, before they re-enter college, just give themselves a wee bit of a transition time to get reconnected with their family and friends, get into their house and get their laundry done, get some groceries in the fridge, maybe sleep a little bit. Maybe watch a little Netflix or play some video games for a day or two and then pop in. What do you think?
I love that. Logistically, I do encourage students. There's a form that I send to students to fill out if they know they're going to miss class for military service, so I can communicate with faculty rather than the student having to email the faculty, because we do have policies that protect them. And most faculty are, understanding of what the obligation is, but it gives it a little more teeth if I send the email. So that's something that's part of my new student orientation. But if you're not, currently looking at deploying, you're not thinking about that information. But logistically, I can help with some of those communications. I don't know, folks, what do you think about the other pieces of his advice?
Yeah, I think it's all really good. I think the one thing that the new state adjutant general is pushing is focusing on education of soldiers. So if it's something like they're missing for annual training, I know at least Army side, we're really, since we went away from that so much for a long time, and it was like, you have to be at training, you have to be at training, trying to get it so that we're, hey, can we work with people? Can we, if they're going to be, missing exams or are they missing school, a week or 2 weeks, can we maybe have them miss 1 week and then have them come in, some other time and do their other week, or, so there's a push within the state to focus on education. So in some ways, units don't always know, and that doesn't always get pushed down super well. And people do sort of have to be an advocate for themselves and know when to say, hey, is there another option?
Honestly, John, I deployed twice in the middle of undergrad. And, working with students who are still deploying and still doing things, I ask what they need or ask if they need any accommodations, but I wouldn't necessarily offer any carte blanche, because a lot of the students are, that it would be devastating if they have to take one semester off and now look like they're going to have to take another one. And so a lot of them are going to be highly motivated. So if you can say, hey, can I see if I can get you your work ahead of time? Or can I make sure you can get access if you want to? Because a lot of particularly the National Guard, if they're using, I think it's something like 80% of anybody in the National Guard enlists for education benefits. Now, that's a made up statistic, but it's not far off. And so a lot of that drive is to get done with school too. So I would be compassionate, allow some grace, and ask if they need anything. But most in my experience aren't going to want to take any more time off. They, if they have to miss a semester, that can be pretty devastating as is, because that upsets their plans. It upsets where they're going in the future. I mean, they're balancing multiple things and they're going to want to get back on the horse.
Yeah, and I see it a lot in the, if they've just joined, they've decided they're going to do their basic training and their advanced training back to back. It has created some issues where, it's like, this is the only slot I can get into, and then we go back and forth with the recruiter a little bit on some of those angles. So I think it kind of depends on what sort of military training it is. But I do try to ask the student also, are you expected? Are you wanting to try and continue in some form or another? And we currently have 7 students who are activated, and many of them have decided to keep going with their classes if they're able to have good internet. So it's been very fascinating in the change of just sort of what that kind of looks like, or what they're missing for, I suppose.
Thanks, everyone.
We had another question in chat. In the past, we've had students who have been uncomfortable seeking mental health services, expressing fear of it harming their ability to serve. Could someone speak to that and how we could encourage students to get the help that they desire or that they need?
Great question.
Great question.
Our base has a lot of resources actually for mental health. If you need just help, need someone to talk to, our base usually has a lot of resources on that. So not necessarily you're not going to get kicked out once they find you're going to therapy or anything. But there's always resources out there. Our base is super good about explaining who to go to. But yeah, it would be also kind of nice to have some resources at school to talk about education and military life. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah, usually our bases are really good about having resources.
So one of the tricky things is the National Guard has access to any of your medical records that you used TRICARE for. And so they can pull those reports. If you did anything through VA, they can pull that as well. I had some personal depression, and I just lied about it and paid out of pocket for a little while until the military finally changed their policy. But when they changed their policy, they needed to verify that I had never seen a psychiatrist, because if I saw a psychiatrist versus a primary care doctor, it could have changed things. The policies are antiquated. Counseling is okay. Medication, I'd encourage them to reach out to somebody on their base before and say, hey, I'm thinking about it. But almost all medications, like any of the SSRIs, any of the antidepressants, are going to be approved, and it's going to be just a paper form. Other things like Adderall, for example, if you need something for attention deficit, that's not going to be covered. So I'd encourage them to reach out to their medical group, at their medical team, to say, hey, what do I need to know? Because if you do it and then the military pulls your records and found out you didn't report it, that's a bigger issue for that person. So I'm going to be honest, it's not perfect, and it's a real problem. But it's getting better in that it used to be if you had any mental health issues, they would just kick you out. So people just dealt with it or drank. And that's been getting better now, but the stigma is still there. And the military hasn't done a great job about really broadcasting its policies regarding mental health needs beyond seeing the base counselor. Jake and Riggs, do you guys have any experience with that, or any ideas, any perceptions on that?
I know the Army side, we have, they have a handful of folks that are mostly actually former military, but now civilian, people that are available and work in that area, counseling, and a few are psychiatrists. But then they refer out quite a bit. And I know Army side, as long as it kind of works through them, usually is kind of all taken care of and okay, and things are managed well, so people are able to stay and not have changes to the service. But yeah, I think if you're doing things on your own and on the side, not with the military, it gets a little trickier.
Thoughts on campus counseling as a resource for folks? Or is that considered going out on your own?
Counseling in all respects is okay.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen anybody have to talk to anybody about counseling. It's if we get to medications that it becomes reportable, and not that it's disqualifying, but you do have to make sure that people use the right channels for that.
And Dr. Nutgrass, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'd like to jump in a little bit too. So as folks have alluded to, it can be a complicated situation, and sometimes it depends on who's referring, and sometimes it depends on the nature of the referral, those sorts of things. I can say with the Vet Center, as I mentioned before, our records are completely separate from DoD, and our records are actually completely separate from VA. And that's by design. Our history is that we were developed as a peer support group for Vietnam veterans who were pretty disenfranchised with the federal government and with VA in general. And so we were established as a kind of a subcategory of the VA that still remains separate from the VA. So if a person comes to see us, if they're eligible for our services, then our records are completely separate from the VA even. And again, this is partially why we are known as the Readjustment Counseling Services. We don't diagnose. We do try to eliminate some of the stigma. We don't report back to commanding officers, those sorts of things. Now, I say that, but also know that there are some caveats to that. As Greg mentioned, medication can kind of complicate things. At the Vet Center, we don't prescribe medication. And so if somebody needs medication, we're not going to be able to provide that service. So that the benefits of coming to us wouldn't apply because they would have to go somewhere else. And sometimes if a person is depressed, a symptom of depression can be suicidality. And sometimes the commanding officers will want some sort of report around a person's threat to self or threat to others and those sorts of things. And then it becomes a really complicated conversation that we have with the person in regards to your records are confidential, and we will not release this without a release of information that is signed by you, except for the fact that your commanding officer is now requesting this. And so how do we want to manage that? Because the commanding officer can't contact me and say, hey, I want so-and-so's records. But there is potential pressure for the service member to release themselves. So it's a conversation with us, and we try to have a very frank conversation with people around these are your rights as a person who's coming to see us. And along those lines, like I said, all the folks here who are counselors, we're all licensed mental health professionals, LICSWs, LMFTs, LPC. So we talk in a very professional language, but we also try to eliminate some of that diagnostic language from the record, so that if it does go out from us, it's a little bit more vague, a little less clinical, for that reason of reducing stigma, for that reason of trying to help folks maintain their service status, those sorts of things. But at the same time, if somebody, depending on the presenting issue, we also have a job to do. We also have to be respectful of our ethics and the laws around suicidality and harm to others, that sort of stuff. So I can say that happens pretty infrequently. Most of it is things that aren't of that nature at all. It's more the talk counseling, that sort of stuff around whatever presenting issue the person may have. But sometimes it can be complicated for sure. So, and I can say that I met with the Adjutant General in Minnesota, General Mankey. I met with him about 6 to 9 months ago, and we were talking about mental health services and specifically around vet center services and what we provide, and how we're separate from even services on the base, and how our records are separate and those sorts of things. So theoretically, the leadership knows and understands what our role is. And we can always send out reminders to them, just generic reminders around this is our role, this is what we can do, this is the expectation about our records and how they're separate from DOD and VA. And we don't do fit for duty as part of our general protocol. And if that's something that you need, then maybe we're not the best fit for you. In terms of what the leadership is looking for. So we've had that conversation with Adjutant General to make sure he and his staff are aware of that. And they, frankly, they seem pretty respectful of that. And I know that not everything is cut and dry and everything is clean, but they understand that, and they seem pretty respectful of what we do and how we operate.
We're so thankful to have you in our region and as a resource. I think, the main answer is you got to look a little bit further, that there is some support available. What that looks like for that person
Absolutely.
Take
Yep, and just as a little bit of a PSA, our eligibility expanded late last year. It used to be that we would just see folks who deployed to combat zone. That's our general catchment area. We also see military sexual trauma. That's been a pretty consistent subject area that we work with. But late last year, our eligibility expanded even to folks who were deployed either domestically to something like the riots that happened in Minneapolis. I don't know if you've seen in the news, but Guard folks are now deploying up to northern Minnesota related to flooding. We can see those folks. It's a little bit challenging. We try to see those folks individually. Our bread and butter is kind of groups, and we see a lot of, like I said, combat veterans. And so trying to put someone who deployed to Minneapolis in a group with combat veterans doesn't really work very well, the same way that putting someone who's experienced military sexual trauma in with combat veterans wouldn't work very well. So we don't have the opportunity to do as many groups or kind of specific programming around those kinds of things yet, partially because it's a new period of eligibility for us. But we can definitely see those folks and do some general mental health counseling for them.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for being here. We are out of time. This was fantastic. I'll send out a recording. I just if you any questions, concerns, feel free to send me an email. But thank you so much to our panelists for being here and giving of your time and your service to our state and to our country. So thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
Thank you.